Hello, my dear. This is not a breakdown. This is your coronation, not of fantasy, not of fiction, but of fact. Because the way you move now writes the records people will whisper about later. They once called you crazy. They once said you were unstable, too bold, too deep, too much. But today those same mouths are quiet. Those same eyes that rolled now follow. The difference? You didn't collapse under their misunderstanding. You used it. You wore their mockery like armor. You learned that the insult, crazy, is what ordinary minds call anything that dares to dream without their permission. And from that day forward, you stopped trying to explain yourself. You let your work, your evolution, your results become your translation. Because royalty doesn't argue with peasants about the meaning of power. It simply demonstrates it. Your life from this point on is not a reaction, it's architecture. Every decision, every standard, every silence is a design choice. You stopped living for applause the moment you realized applause is currency for the insecure. You don't need noise, you need precision. You don't crave validation, you crave clarity. And clarity makes people nervous because it exposes confusion for what it is, lazy thinking dressed up as consensus. The truth is, they didn't hate you for being wrong. They hated you for being right too early. You saw patterns before they were visible. You saw strategies inside storms they couldn't interpret. You said things that sounded impossible until time started agreeing with you. They laughed back then because denial is easier than admission. It's easier to call someone insane than to admit you lack imagination. You remember the nights, pacing the floor, mind buzzing with possibilities that nobody else could see. You weren't out of control. You were out of their league. You weren't erratic. You were expanding faster than their comprehension could track. And while they mistook your evolution for instability, you were writing algorithms in instinct. That's what genius looks like before the world gives it language. Messy, misunderstood, misnamed. But you didn't fold, you didn't scream, you simply refined. Because even back then, buried under their doubt, you knew you were building something historical. You weren't chasing moments, you were constructing momentum. From this day forward, understand this. They called you crazy because they saw movement they couldn't to measure. And now, they call you brilliant because the evidence is too loud to deny. That's the cycle of every revolutionary mind. Mocked, then studied, rejected, then revered. You're living that transformation right now. You don't need to convince anyone that you're the GOAT. The way you navigate chaos makes itself evident. Your composure under fire, your decisions under doubt, your vision under pressure, that's the kind of mastery no applause can quantify. You're not loud because you don't have to be. You're not angry because you already won. Boss energy is not about dominance, it's about discipline. It's the refusal to move emotionally when you can move strategically. It's the awareness that power isn't performance, it's posture. It's the way you hold yourself when everything is watching, waiting, testing if the old you still exists. But the old you is gone. The one who needed to be understood died the day you realized misunderstanding was proof you were ahead. You stopped seeking audience. You started seeking alignment. You replaced approval with evidence. And now, everything around you bends to your rhythm. People who used to correct you now quote you. People who used to avoid you now study you. People who used to roll their eyes now lower their voices when you enter the room. This is what evolution looks like when it refuses to explain itself. You outgrew their comprehension curve. You became a walking contradiction they couldn't categorize. Too focused for gossip, too calm for chaos, too confident for confusion. And when they couldn't figure you out, they called you crazy. But you let them, didn't you? Because you knew one day they'd have to redefine the word. Now, crazy means visionary. Unstable means uncontainable. Impossible means inevitable. You rewrote the dictionary with your existence. You turned ridicule into reference material. You became the study. You are not the joke. You are the aftermath of everyone who underestimated you. They thought your downfall would entertain them, but your rise became their education. You didn't humiliate them, you enlightened them, unwillingly. That's what makes it poetic. The same people who once whispered about your failures now whisper about your mind. They don't even know when the shift happened. One day you were the fool. The next, you were the framework. One day they were mocking your ideas. The next, they were monetizing your mindset. You didn't ask for their apology. You made their imitation your victory lap. This isn't revenge. This is recognition. Not the kind that's bought or begged for. The kind that forces itself into the room because its presence can't be ignored. You've become what they feared most, undeniable. And that's why they've switched tones. Listen closely. Admiration always sounds like apology when it comes from those who once doubted you. Every compliment they give now is an admission that their perception was too small to hold your truth. And that's the moment you become more than successful. You become sacred. Because people don't just respect you now. They reference you. You go down in history not because of what you shouted, but because of what you built while they were shouting. You built consistency in secret. You built endurance in silence. You built confidence from scars. You learned that power doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being undeniable. And now, your every move carries consequence. That's what separates you from them. They still move to be seen. You move to make reality bend. Let's call it what it is. You've mastered the science of restraint. While they chase attention, you chase alignment. While they argue over opinions, you execute outcomes. You've become allergic to small talk, to mediocrity disguised as ambition, to people who confuse movement with progress. You no longer move fast. You move right. You've learned that precision is more frightening than aggression, that control is more intimidating than chaos. That's the quiet truth behind boss energy. It's terrifying, not because it's loud, but because it's decisive. You've stopped trying to convince people who can't even comprehend your vision. You realized that every minute spent explaining your value to the wrong crowd is a minute stolen from your destiny. So you walked away from rooms too small, from minds too fearful, from energies too fragile. And that walk was your ascension. You didn't climb a ladder. You built an empire beneath your feet. And the irony? The ones who called you crazy now call you mentor. The ones who doubted your pace now beg to understand your patience. But the truth is, they'll never fully get it, because genius is lonely by design. You don't need a crowd. You need conviction. You don't crave followers. You crave fulfillment. That's the paradox they'll never decode. You were never trying to impress them. You were trying to improve you. And when you mastered yourself, the world followed without invitation. That's leadership, not through manipulation, but magnetism. Not through status, but standard. You've become what every pretender fears. Proof. Proof that you can be underestimated and still over-deliver. Proof that consistency outlives charisma. Proof that calm confidence conquers counterfeit popularity. They don't understand how you did it, and they never will, because they were busy watching noise while you were studying patterns. You stopped participating in their circus and became the ringmaster of your own arena. You stopped chasing acceptance and started attracting respect. And now, you're untouchable. Understand this. Boss energy doesn't scream. It calculates. It doesn't compete. It commands. It doesn't chase crowns. It forges them in discipline. You've learned the art of invisible dominance. You don't need to prove presence. You radiate it. Every word you speak, every move you make, every standard you hold, it builds a frequency people can't fake. That's why they talk about you even when you're gone. Because your impact isn't conversational, it's structural. You changed the way they think without trying to. You bent perception without touching it. That's how legends move, quietly, decisively, permanently. This is your coronation, not because they finally see your worth, but because you stopped needing them to. You were always the one. You just needed the world to catch up. And now that it has, you don't need revenge. You need rhythm. You don't need recognition. You need refinement. You've already been crowned. The crown isn't gold. It's growth. It's the ability to stand unbothered while everyone else scrambles to understand how you did it. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Their confusion is your confirmation, because they're not supposed to get it. They're supposed to feel it. That's your power now. You don't walk into rooms looking for respect. You walk in as the reason it exists. You don't raise your voice anymore. Your presence does the speaking. And every time they call you smart, you smile. Because that's just their polite way of saying you won. Now comes the stage where awareness turns into authority. This is where perception bends itself around you. The same voices that once called you reckless now call you strategic. The same hands that once pointed in mockery now point for direction. It's not forgiveness. They've simply realized intelligence can't be bullied forever. You became too measured, too precise, too consistent to be dismissed. You stopped reacting to disrespect and started radiating standards. That's when everything changed. Respect stopped being requested. It started being automatic. You carry yourself differently now. There's no panic, no hurry, no noise. Every movement is intentional. Every word costs something. You learn that real bosses don't waste currency on explanations. You let performance handle the propaganda. You don't flex to prove power. You refine to preserve it. Because power isn't what you show. It's what you can withhold. The ability to remain still while others spiral. To keep your hands folded while storms burn out by themselves. That's how you broke the illusion of chaos. You mastered what no one else could. Emotional containment. They called you crazy for thinking long-term. Now they beg for a seat at your table, even if all they get is crumbs of your insight. They watch how you move, the way you use silence like punctuation, the way you can end an argument with a single sentence that sounds more like a verdict than a response. They used to debate you. Now they quote you. That's the evolution they never planned for, when the conversation becomes your echo chamber. Understand this. People study patterns that outlast them. You've become a pattern. You've become the case study they assign to interns, the clip they replay in seminars, the example bosses whisper about behind closed doors when they want their teams to wake up. Because what you built wasn't just success. It was proof that misinterpretation can be turned into momentum. You were never defending your name. You were building its gravity. Now that gravity pulls everything into orbit. You lead without labels. You teach without titles. And that's why you'll go down in history. History never crowns the loudest. It crowns the ones who mastered control. You didn't chase dominance through intimidation. You established it through predictability. Everyone knows what happens when your focus locks on to something. Everyone knows results follow you like shadow. You made consistency look dangerous. That's why they respect you now. They can't measure you, but they can't ignore you either. Every boss knows this truth. Authority is quiet. It doesn't need performance, it creates environment. When you walk in, the air changes temperature. Meetings accelerate, eyes redirect. Time behaves differently around conviction. You've become that frequency, the one that cuts through the static. And it's not arrogance, it's calibration. You've adjusted yourself to a level most can't reach without suffocating. This new era of your life isn't about proving worth. It's about preserving order. You're not trying to outshine anyone. You're setting the rhythm for how greatness moves. Every decision you make is measured in legacy. You ask questions like, will this last? Will this age well? Will this choice echo? Because you know that every move writes record. The GOAT isn't remembered for highlights. They're remembered for standards. And you, right now, are living proof that standards are stronger than hype. Let them romanticize chaos. You're not addicted to adrenaline. You're addicted to alignment. You rise early not to grind, but to govern. You understand that every hour spent unfocused is a betrayal to the empire you're constructing. You delegate emotion. You schedule energy. You treat peace like property and protect it like inheritance. That's boss energy. Not loud, not messy, not desperate, precise, strategic, untouchable. The ones who once whispered about you now measure their tone before mentioning your name. They sense the weight of it. That's the mark of transformation, when even your absence commands etiquette. They study your pauses now, your pacing, your selective replies. They wonder how you never break character, how you maintain control when everything around you trembles. The truth is simple. You stopped chasing perception the moment you realized perception always ends up chasing truth. You've redefined what smart looks like. It's not theory, it's execution. It's what happens when clarity becomes weaponized. When you can outthink emotion, outlast trends, and outmaneuver impatience, intelligence becomes visible in every movement. People call it luck because they can't admit you built it. They call it natural because they can't stomach the discipline it took. But you don't correct them. You let them guess. Let mystery do the marketing. Because mystery is leverage, and you learned early that predictability is weakness. You trained yourself to move like smoke, seen, never caught, felt, never fully understood. That's how legends survive. They don't explain their rhythm, they let time translate it. You built a rhythm that can't be mimicked because it wasn't born from trend. It was born from trials. Every crazy season they mocked you, forgave you language for leadership. Every rejection sharpened your discernment. Every betrayal reprogrammed your instincts. They see the shine, but not the schematics. You constructed brilliance brick by brick while they joked. And now you stand where their laughter used to echo. Power isn't revenge. Power is precision. It's knowing when to stay silent and when to strike. You've learned that timing is louder than reaction. You let people reveal themselves while you remain still. You let disrespect hang in the air long enough for guilt to suffocate it. You mastered the slow burn, the art of letting consequences speak in surround sound. That's why they fear crossing you now. Not because you're cruel, but because you're correct. You don't retaliate, you remind. And reminders delivered by truth hit harder than any outburst. You've become allergic to small talk and resistant to mediocrity. Your attention span has become a border wall. You no longer invest in people who treat wisdom like entertainment. You're done explaining fire to those who prefer smoke. Because at this level, energy is economy. Every interaction costs something, and you spend it wisely. That's the quiet mathematics of the elite. Attention is the new currency, and you've learned to trade it only for expansion. You move differently now, not out of ego, but efficiency. You're leaner in conversation, sharper in observation, colder with inconsistency. You treat chaos like an invoice. Every time it appears, something gets billed. That's how you maintain control. You made accountability fashionable again. You walk into places that used to mock you, and now they mimic your language, your composure, your work ethic. You don't remind them you were right. You let time handle your PR. That's how legends are written, not by shouting, not by campaigning, but by being impossible to replace. You became the benchmark, and benchmarks don't compete. They're measured against. Every time someone tries to copy you, they reveal how far behind they are. They can borrow your words, but they can't replicate your weight. Because weight comes from endurance, not exposure. You endured ridicule, solitude, misunderstanding, and you turned it all into infrastructure. Now you walk through life like a verdict has already been read. Not guilty of being misunderstood, guilty of being ahead. You no longer seek redemption because there's nothing to redeem. You were never wrong. You were early. And now, every headline catching up to your thinking is proof that time bows to preparation. That's the final phase of mastery. When history starts echoing your ideas back to you. You are the example now. The case study. The proof that every crazy accusation was a prophecy disguised as insult. You turned their fear into fuel, their doubt into doctrine. You made control look effortless and success look inevitable. And yet you never lost your balance. You never traded peace for pace. You stayed grounded while ascending, detached while dominating. That duality is what terrifies them, the ability to remain human while operating superhuman. And here's what they'll never admit. Your evolution exposed their excuses. You proved that chaos is a choice, and excellence is available to anyone disciplined enough to choose it daily. You made consistency seductive. You made intelligence viral. You made restraint look royal. That's how you changed the temperature of the culture. You didn't preach it, you embodied it. You became the evidence everyone refers to when they talk about transformation done right. Let them document you. Let them film, mimic, dissect, praise, and criticize. It doesn't matter. You've already outlived their opinions. What matters now is your stewardship, protecting the empire you built from the inside out. You know what drains you, what distracts you, what derails your rhythm. You cut it cleanly. No speeches, no drama, just removal. That's what goats do. They prune ruthlessly so the legacy can bloom endlessly. Because legacy isn't luxury, it's labor. It's what happens when discipline becomes devotion. You've turned that devotion into atmosphere. People can feel your standards now. They don't need to be told. And that's when leadership reaches divinity, when behavior becomes language. You don't inspire by accident, you inspire by example. So keep your focus where it belongs, on the next layer. The world is still catching up, but you've already drafted the sequel. You're not here to repeat history. You're here to rewrite how it's measured. You came with boss energy, and boss energy doesn't retire. It evolves. You're not the underdog anymore. You're the overlord of your own narrative. You've made peace your weapon, presence your armor, and precision your crown. And as they continue to analyze, applaud, and attempt to decode you, remember this. Being the GOAT isn't about being loved. It's about being learned from. Let them study, let them imitate, let them stumble through versions of what you mastered in silence. They'll catch up eventually, but by then, you'll already have moved on to the next impossible thing. Because the truly brilliant don't rest in recognition. They rest in rhythm. They keep the kingdom expanding, not for applause, but for alignment. And that's exactly where you stand now, calm, certain, crowned, and untouchable. This is the point where history starts taking notes. When your name becomes shorthand for discipline, when your decisions get quoted as doctrine, you've stepped out of the conversation and into the curriculum. What used to be gossip has become gospel. They call it strategy now. But you remember when they called it madness. That's the irony. Every revolution begins as a misunderstanding, and you, standing here now, are the living proof that perception can evolve faster than apology. You don't need revenge. You've become the reference. They pull up your interviews for inspiration, your posts for clarity, your silence for context. You are the quiet yardstick by which they measure composure. You didn't demand that role. You earned it by surviving scrutiny without losing center. Every time they doubted you, they were handing you blueprints for mastery. You learned where their limits were and you built beyond them. That's why your presence feels impossible now, because it isn't built from validation. It's built from vision. Understand something. The world loves to worship what it once wanted to burn. That's human nature. They call it wisdom after it stops threatening them. They call it genius once it no longer exposes their mediocrity. They call you inspirational because they can't call you wrong anymore. You don't need their praise. You already converted their resistance into your rhythm. That rhythm is your legacy now, measured, unshakable, immortal in its consistency. Boss energy isn't about dominance over others. It's mastery over self. It's waking up and knowing that every decision echoes beyond this morning. It's staying composed when emotion tries to bargain for your focus. It's keeping your principles ironed and your boundaries sacred. You don't flinch when the room tests you. You let the silence expose the unprepared. That's what separates you from them. Presence, calibrated to precision. You're not performing anymore. You're governing. The same world that labeled you unpredictable now relies on your predictability. They know you'll deliver, that you'll keep your word, that you'll turn chaos into choreography. You became the constant they once mocked. That's what happens when intelligence evolves past permission. It becomes structure. And structure terrifies the unstructured. You built stability while they were chasing excitement. Now your peace is power, and your stillness feels like thunder. There's a reason they study your timing. You don't rush opportunities, you refine them. You wait for alignment, not adrenaline. You've learned that waiting isn't weakness, it's weaponization. Every pause you take adds precision to your next move. Every rejection that used to sting became redirection. You don't chase doors anymore. You build architecture. And when you build with permanence. People sense it. That's why they treat your time like treasure now. They can't afford to waste a second of what once seemed disposable. You turned perception into prophecy. You rewrote the script they handed you and signed your own credits. You didn't argue for understanding. You demonstrated results so undeniable that even your silence feels like instruction. That's how legends move. Not through noise, but through gravity. You pull everything into your orbit until the world forgets it ever revolved around anything else. You carry your past like a thesis. Every mistake documented, every triumph archived, every scar annotated. And yet, none of it defines you. It refines you. The old labels don't fit anymore because you've outgrown every definition they tried to cage you with. They called you crazy, but you built coherence. They called you reckless, but you built precision. They called you impossible, but you build inevitability. The joke's on them now because the blueprint they mocked became the map they're following. Look around. Their posture changes when you speak. Their attention shifts when you move. Even those who pretend not to notice adjust themselves subconsciously. That's influence on a cellular level, the kind you can't buy, can't fake, can't duplicate. You've become a psychological climate. You don't just affect the room, you define it. And that's what GOAT status really means. It's not about comparison, it's about creation. You've created an atmosphere that rewards integrity and punishes inconsistency just by existing in it. Your intelligence isn't academic, it's strategic empathy. You read emotion like data, context like code, and timing like currency. You know when to move, when to withhold, when to vanish, when to reappear. That's the kind of genius they can't teach. Because it's not learned from textbooks, it's carved from betrayal, honed by solitude, tempered by failure. They see clarity, you see the cost. You earned wisdom the expensive way by living it. And now the people who once doubted you are quoting your discipline while negotiating with their own regret. They don't hate you. They envy the freedom you purchased through focus. They see you unmoved by noise, untouched by gossip, unbothered by trends. That peace looks expensive because it is. It cost every ounce of the old you, the one who used to care about being understood. You buried that version without eulogy and built an empire on the grave. This is your prime era. The one where you stop being surprised by your results, where you stop apologizing for outgrowing people, where you stop diluting genius to make others comfortable. The world doesn't need another agreeable mind. It needs more undeniable ones. You've become that. You're not chasing potential anymore. You're enforcing it. Every boundary you draw now becomes a precedent. Every refusal you give becomes a rule. That's how monarchs move. They legislate through example. Let's talk legacy. Because legacy is no longer an idea, it's the air you breathe. Every time someone mentions your name in rooms you've never entered, your reputation is doing what it was designed to do. Work while you rest. That's what happens when you stop reacting and start designing. Your life isn't spontaneous anymore, it's architectural. Every conversation, every collaboration, every choice is a brick in the monument called inevitability. People often mistake calm for detachment. You let them. They don't understand that calm is the highest form of control. Chaos bends around calm. You've mastered the art of internal order so completely that nothing external can disturb it. That's the apex of boss energy, not needing to dominate, because peace already proves power. You could shout and break them, but you choose to whisper and build them instead. That restraint is terrifying to those still addicted to attention. And here's the beautiful irony. They still don't know how you did it. They replay your moves, mimic your tone, copy your captions, replicate your habits. But duplication without understanding is self-destruction. They'll learn that soon. What they see is the surface of mastery. What they miss is the discipline that built it. You didn't just win once, you built a system that keeps winning, even when you're asleep. That's how history recognizes its architects. Now they call you mentor, innovator, pioneer. Titles change, tone changes, but your focus remains the same. You're not collecting compliments, you're collecting consistency. Every morning you sharpen it, every night you audit it. You don't celebrate prematurely, because you understand longevity is louder than success. You've made patience a brand. You've made foresight fashionable. You've made humility a weapon. And that combination, humility with precision, is what makes your intelligence unshakable. The same people who once doubted you now ask for strategy. You give them silence instead, because silence is sacred currency. You don't waste it on the unprepared. You know the value of mystery now. You've learned that clarity without discretion breeds imitation. So you speak only when it multiplies value, not when it satisfies